I used to live in Washington State, in the Pacific Northwest. I worked at a roadside diner where I would often close my shift, and we would usually close at 2 a.m., although that was quite late for the area, which was relatively quiet. Since it was close to the highway, it was common for at least one or two people to show up before closing time. When I moved from the south to this area, I noticed that people here are a little different. In the south, people are very warm and value informal conversation, but here, although they are friendly, they're not as sociable. I used to waitress in the south, and there were a lot more conversations with customers there. Here, people tend to want to be alone more, especially late at night. On this particular night, it was already close to closing time. The kitchen technically closed at 2, and while it was still open, it wasn't exactly a good look for a customer to come in that late to order food. Still, that night, a heavy-set man showed up around 1:50 a.m. He was wearing high-waisted pants, a gray shirt, a brown jacket, and glasses with a mustache. When I asked if he wanted a table or the counter, he chose the table and kept a smile on his face the whole time. I smiled back as I handed him the menu, told him the kitchen closed in 10 minutes. He glanced at it briefly and ordered black coffee and toast. While waiting for my order to be ready, the man who introduced himself as Nolan struck up a conversation which was unusual at that hour. He asked me if I was local and started complaining about the potholes in the road, which was light conversation. But he got a little specific when he asked where I lived, which prompted me to give him a vague answer. He said he had recently moved to town. Analyzing his behavior, I thought he seemed like an older guy, and maybe he was trying to flirt. Since I was used to dealing with this, it didn't bother me much. Since he was the last customer, the chef brought his order to the counter. I served him his food. His order to the counter. While he ate, I started cleaning the tables, and while he ate, I started for the end of the shift. And when he finished, waiting for the end of the shift, bill on the table. When he finished suggesting that we were about the bill on the table, politely suggesting that we were about after he left, I finished cleaning, said goodbye to the chef, and headed towards my car. In the parking lot, I saw 3 cars, mine, the chef's, and a third that I didn't recognize. It looked like an older car, maybe from 2005. I couldn't see if anyone was inside the car because of the darkness. On the way back home, my car's dashboard indicated that the tire pressure was dropping rapidly. Not knowing how to change a tire, I started to get nervous, until I was forced to pull over. As soon as I got out to check the tire, I saw headlights approaching and the car stopped next to me. I ran back inside and locked the doors. I heard a knock on the window, and, to my surprise, it was Nolan, the diner's customer. He waved, smiling, wearing gloves. He called me by name and asked if I was okay, as if it were a great coincidence that we had found ourselves there. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I rolled down the window just enough to talk. He offered to help me change the tire, but I told him I was waiting for my boyfriend. During this conversation, I had already dialed 911 on my cell phone and kept the call active without him noticing. Nolan became less friendly and left my sight for a moment. I placed the phone on my lap, talking to the 911 operator as discreetly as possible about my location. Suddenly I heard glass shatter next to me, and Nolan reached into the car grabbed my cell phone, threw it away, and then drove away. I stayed in the car, waiting for the police to arrive. A few minutes later, I saw the lights of the patrol cars and waved frantically. The officers were kind enough to change my tire and escort me home. I was later informed that the investigation was still ongoing, but I never heard if Nolan had been caught. After a long day at work, I looked at my watch. There were only 5 minutes left on my shift, and relief and exhaustion began to mix as I packed my things. It was then that a man with a thin beard and messy hair approached. He was wearing a stained gray t-shirt and black sweatpants that were ripped in several places. I thought to myself, just one more call and I'll be done for the day. I asked if he needed help. He hesitated, looking away repeatedly as if he were being followed, which began to make me uneasy. I repeated the question, this time a little more impatiently. In a low, hesitant voice, he finally asked where the bathrooms were. I pointed the way, and he started walking in that direction, but he kept looking at me, which only increased as my coworker arrived to take over. I grabbed my things and practically ran to the employee lounge to finish work. After changing my clothes, I went to the parking lot and sat on a bench to wait for Jordan, a 17-year-old coworker who would give me a ride. After what seemed like an interminable wait, he finally arrived. We decided to stop at a restaurant for dinner, but as we ate, I noticed something strange. The same man I had helped earlier was there, sitting a few tables away, staring at me. My heart raced, and when I told Jordan, he just said it was probably a coincidence. Although I tried to agree, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. On the way home, my discomfort intensified when, as I stopped at a red light, I noticed the same man in the car next to me, looking directly at me again. I told Jordan, who began to worry as well. When we finally arrived in my neighborhood, we drove around the block a few times to make sure he wasn't following us. As I said goodbye and went inside, I felt a little safer. My family wasn't there, and I was alone, so I went straight to my room. However, I soon heard a noise coming from the window. Looking outside, I saw the man standing in my yard, looking directly at my room and smiling. I immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, he had disappeared. This event affected me deeply that winter. When the park closed, I quit my job. I haven't seen the man since, but the incident remains a vivid and disturbing memory. Another time, during a night shift at the restaurant where I worked, a rainy, calm night promised little business. Just before the end of the shift, a couple came in. He looked to be in his 40s, and she looked to be in her 20s. As I greeted the couple, the man began to engage me in conversation, while the woman remained silent, just listening. When he asked me if I lived alone, I casually replied that I did, that I lived nearby, and that it was a quiet area. I didn't see anything alarming in the question at the time, but now I understand how dangerous my answer was. They finished their meal and left. Later, when I was alone in the house, I heard a persistent knock on the door. I looked out the window and saw a young woman, soaking wet, asking to be let in. She said she was being followed by a man and needed help. At that moment, I recognized her face. It was the same girl from the restaurant who was with the older man. With my heart racing, I realized that this could be a trap. I closed the door and called the police, who arrived quickly, but the couple had already disappeared. In the following days, I found a threatening message on my apartment door, written in pen, that read, "Thank you for your service, Beth." Terrified, I decided to move to a new apartment soon after, seeking safety and tranquility.